So here are Donald Blake's systems. So we have a Windows Phone in there. We have 2 systems in there that we're taking a look at. Now, the reason I really wanted to use a Windows Phone, at this point in time, the Apple iTunes and Android Office 365 apps had not been released. And they're actually it's kind of a fairly new release that's out there. But the reason I wanted the Office 365 releases is the same reason that you see other things down here of interest. So if you notice on the phone here, what is this? Skype. Okay, so you have Skype on a phone. How many of you have Skype on your phones? Just curious. Okay, a lot of people turn it off because it's way too noisy. Yeah, me too. How many people have Skype on your desktop systems or an app on your system at this point for Windows? All right. How many of you have Skype on multiple systems? Work, home, phone. So what happens if I'm on one system and I Skype? What happens on all the other systems? Yeah, they have record of call, they have the record of the chat. What immediately happens, even if I'm not logged onto that system at that point, if I log into Skype at a later point in time? Will all that history be transferred over to the new system? Yes, it will. What we're talking about here is data synchronization. And data synchronization, and I'm covering it immediately in here, is something I want you to constantly think about when you're talking about devices these days. It's, you're no longer stovepiped between devices. And the first time we ever saw this was with email. Thank God. You can imagine how horrific this would be. If I'm on my phone and I read an email and I go log into that email web client and I go to that same email, does it show as read or unread? Read. Data synchronization. You read it on one device, on the other device it also shows the same action. If I open up a calendar event on one device and set a calendar event, the same calendar event will pop up on the second device. Synchronization first happened for email and calendaring, but it's now migrated to every operation that is occurring on your Windows host. Crazy thing about Windows, especially with Windows 8, and of course no one adopted Windows 8, but Windows 8 and 8.1 were really Windows 10 version 1, until they figured out that everyone hated their desktop. But it really was. In most of the artifacts, 99% of them are the same artifacts between both operating systems. Between them. But the crazy thing that Windows and Microsoft did at that point in time, if you simply log in to your Microsoft Portal account between 2 hosts, there is a bevy of information that is going to be translated across those different devices immediately. Same thing happens on your Apple ecosystem as well. Your Apple device, if you have a Mac, if you have an iPad, all of those devices are synchronizing data across all of them, from passwords to browser history and more. The browsers themselves have their own synchronization capabilities built into Chrome, built into Firefox now, Quantum, or whatever you want to call it. The same thing's occurring, but nothing is more aggressive than what Apple's doing and what Microsoft's doing from the operating system level. And this data synchronization is something that is fascinating when you start talking about it. And if you notice, how many people have more than one Windows 10 system you log into at this point? Have you ever changed the desktop? What happens on the second system immediately? It changes the desktop. And you start to think, well, I wonder what other things are being transferred back and forth between both hosts. I don't know if you know this or not, and I've done a lot of research on this just for this class. I have my own desktop system here with I go on it. I have a bunch of recent documents I've recently opened up in Microsoft, like in Word, and I log a brand new untouched system. It's like when I initially got the Surface, I logged into it, I launched Word, waited about 10 minutes, closed it, launched it again, looked at the recent files opened. They've been populated from system to system, and it's written into the registry. So whether you like it or not, your systems are constantly talking to one another. Office 365 is talking to one another. And it's intended not to be a blight on privacy. It is really intended to make a single user experience that is pleasurable for the end user. That everything that they do is going to be remembered and recorded to make a more pleasing operating system. Everyone in here is like, well, that's pretty scary because we know how it can be used. But in the real world, you take any average person that's out there, the more that these devices look the same, the easier it is for the person to use. So if it's the same OneDrive, all of your files are in the OneDrive, and all you have to do is go to that one location. It's the same drive on all these locations, all the same recent documents that opened up. You know, it's the kind of thing that ads that Comcast has. Start watching on your TV and move it over to your iPad and you pick it up from the same location. It looks, you know, scary, but that's what the operating systems are doing behind the scenes. Data synchronization forensics is a key part of this class that we're going to be talking about throughout this week. And it gets fascinating, especially when you go to the Mac class, you see the same thing. From the iOS devices and what's being recorded on those iOS devices, you know, transferred to the Mac, transferred to the iPads, transferred to what's in your cloud. Same thing that's happening on Microsoft side as well. All the Microsoft systems are talking to one another as well. And in many cases, whether you like it or not, this is occurring behind the scenes. Microsoft is doing it to make it a much more pleasing environment. The other thing you see in here is like obviously social media. How people communicate through different apps is a big, you know, thing that people like to have, that they don't, you know, if you move to working on a desktop system to your phone, that you could just pick up and leave, and it's like, well, you're still texting the same channel. That's why Skype records its history and populates its history across all these devices. Facebook is another thing that's fascinating out there. Facebook Messenger, you know, a lot of the other ones, Twitter, the conversations within Twitter. Especially today, when you start talking about you know, standard cases that are going on out there, the fact that data synchronization is going on is actually probably the #1 cause of divorce today. Go ahead and say it. And if you think about it, you know, like I've had friends who say that, you know, their spouse or someone else, their boyfriend, girlfriend, was on their desktop system and their phone was in the other room, and they're texting or chatting with someone in Facebook Messenger, and on the device, it's all these pop-ups are in lock screen mode, just popping up, and all the messages are showing up there, and the person looks down and sees the entire conversation. You know, this kind of thing that's going on, you know. And then we start getting into the crazy things that are dealing with these Apple Watches and your Fitbits and everything else. You know, all of a sudden, you know, your heart rate is constantly recorded. You know, someone wears their watch, you know, out at 3 a.m. And it's like, hey, honey, I know you're not working out at 3 a.m., but your heart rate is very high right now. You know, this kind of thing is, it is, you know, the data synchronization across your different devices is problematic for just, you know, your personal privacy, you know, whether or not, you know, it's good or bad, and, you know, however you want to define that. But most people aren't thinking that all these data is being synchronized. It's also, you know, when you talk about, you actually have to go out of your way to turn it off too. It really is not easy to do so. And that's where it gets fascinating when you start talking about this stuff in here.